Hello and welcome everyone. I'm really glad to have someone that we all really admire and enjoy reading about and hearing about from time to time. Old friend Saurabh Mukherjee, who I knew from his days at Ambit, where he built a very successful brokerage, and they also then, of course, branched off and built a very successful investment management firm called Marcellus. Uh, for those of you who don't know, Saurabh actually comes from the very, as we were joking, the very socialistic London School of Economics, while I went to the very so-called capitalistic London Business School. And here we are meeting, as you say, in the last liberal arts, which is investing, which forces you to kind of broaden your horizons and see things from very various dimensions. And really Saurabh exemplifies something like that. And he's led a very interesting life. I believe he, at some point, was delivering newspapers like Warren Buffett did in his young days. He cleaned bathrooms like all of us did in our young days in our middle class homes. He's also worked as a clerk at a bank before, of course, his famous career at Ambit and then now at Marcellus. He's also, as you would all know, those of you who follow him, he's written some very fabulous books, which at least I've enjoyed reading a lot. The Unusual Billionaires being one of them, the Coffee Can Portfolio, which of course is the premise on which he built Marcellus and which is going places. And now, of course, the Victory Project, which he and Anupam will talk about. And it is indeed an interesting book. I've been already reading it over the last week, and I'm already enchanted with the kinds of stories he's found and the correlations he's built up over there. And one thing I must mention, don't try reaching Saurabh. He's not on WhatsApp. He's not on social media. And he's extremely focused on what he does. So, figure out, email him or whatever. And now turning to Anupam, who also I've secretly been admiring for many years. He was a great analyst who wrote on telecom stocks. He wrote on auto stocks. And like most people with consumer discretionary, stocks in India, you at some point realize this isn't going anywhere. So I guess like our investments, he broadened out his horizons, started writing about business families, politics, and the like. And he also runs his very popular podcast called Paisa Vaisa, which I thought was on the Rishi Kapoor song. I correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Paisa ye kaisa nahi koi aisa. So maybe it's based on that. It's a fun podcast to go and figure out what Anupam is thinking about. But very interesting, gentlemen, we brought for you in the light of what Flame tries to do, is to put people from various disciplines together and kind of expand your brains and your horizons. And two, really good exponents of that craft are here. I'm going to hold up two books, which Saurabh told me. This, of course, is Robert Hagstrom, who wrote the book on Warren Buffett as well, very famously. And he does call Investing the Last Liberal Arts. And if you want to get there, I've been advised you must hold this up. If you read this, maybe you'll get there. So with that blurb, Saurabh and Anupam, let me hand it over to you. All the best.
Thank you, Manish. A really generous introduction. And if I can, state that I am a complete fanboy of yours. If there's anyone who exemplifies our book and the stuff that we do out here, it has to be you, Manish Bhai, because the kind of simplicity, the kind of clarity that you've got in your investing career, which is there for everyone to see. It's just exactly what we've written about in this book. So anyway, thanks very much for that really generous introduction to me and Saurabh. So folks, welcome to the webinar. We will present you today the results of 2 years of research on the drivers of outsized professional success in highly competitive industries and professions. I will become the first half of the presentation, and Saurabh will join us for the second half. We just give me a minute. I will share my screen so that we can. Okay. Yes. Yes, here it is. So let's get this started. The data, rather stark data that all of us would be aware that India's GDP has tripled in the past 20 years. And even on a per capita basis, we've gone up to around about 2,000 to 2,500 US dollars, from about $600. So we've grown faster than any democracy has ever grown in the history of this planet. In fact, India has grown faster over the past 20 years than any large country has ever grown, with the sole exception of China. Now, as you all, so all this prosperity, it hasn't really produced any happiness, any meaningful happiness. Nearly half the marriages in our large cities are breaking apart. Job security itself is a source of mental stress for a big part of the workforce. Mental health is an issue, and all of this is something that is pre-COVID. So whatever we are talking about today has in fact probably multiplied, because we're now entering the 6th month of lockdown, or you could call it unlocking, or whatever it is. So it's no surprise then Dr. Sharmila Banwat, a Mumbai-based psychologist who we spoke to, says that she sees many people who really can't figure out how to strike a work-life balance. They understand it conceptually but can't implement it practically. So where is the gap? I mean, you've had this massive boom on the economy in the last 20 years, and it's just still we all have the sense of hollowness. So where exactly is the problem? So what we believe is, at the core of the human mind, inability to find happiness even after so much of hard work is just how we are wired. If you look at the picture below, for example, on the extreme right hand side, it's a fairly famous picture. Half of us probably see a young woman, and half of us see an old woman. So psychologists and cognitive scientists like Nick Chater, Steven Sloman, and Philip Fernbach are telling us that we suffer from 3 illusions. The first is the knowledge illusion, where we are confident that we know how complex operations work, but we probably don't even know how things like bicycles or toilet flushes or zippers work. Second is the illusion that we can multitask, where in fact our brain is wired to do one thing at one time. A lot of us, we see probably some of us even use a mobile while talking, and even if it's a hands-free, there's now enough data to show that if you're doing that, your mind is distracted, and there is a risk out there. And third is the visual illusion. So you think that you can see this PowerPoint slide, or you could probably, while you're reading a page, you can see the entire page. Whereas eye tracking software actually tells you that at max, you'll be focusing on 12 to 14 letters at one time. And if these illusions weren't enough, now there's enough data to show that our memories are also fallible. We think that we are remembering the past, but we are just believing a story. So if you look at the Royal Bengal tiger below, Nick Chater has done a mind-blowing experiment where he asked people to just visualize with their eyes closed, what do they think, how do the stripes on a tiger go? Are they vertical? Are they horizontal on the head and the body and the legs? And you think that you know how a tiger's stripes flow, right? We got it wrong. A lot of people got it wrong, because that's just not how it works. As you can see in the picture, the stripes are actually very different from what we know in real life. So if you're wondering that despite all of this, how have we survived so far? So one reason for that is that the brain loves to make shortcuts. We make estimates, we make guesses, we figure our way out using these biases, but that's just survival. The question is, how do you thrive? So how do you find both professional and personal happiness? And for that, we present to you the simplicity paradigm. This is our 3-tiered framework that starts from first principles and goes all the way up to actual results. So the first tier, the bottom tier of the pyramid, as you can see, is specialize, simplify, spiritualize, and we'll get into all of this now. And you follow this up with 3 very specific behaviors: declutter, creativity, and memory, and collaboration. And once you do this 3+3 process, and it's not an easy process, it's a very rigorous, very disciplined process, you will see a massive transformation in your life. And the top tier that you see out there is the result. That's simplicity in business, simplicity in investing. So for this book, we've done huge amount of research. We've met a lot of people, practitioners, experts, guests. We've read a lot of books, and whoever we've met, we found either the entire simplicity paradigm in work out there, or most of the elements out there. So let's start. Let's take the first point of specialization. Now, all of us know how specialization works. In fact, the last 10 years probably has been the decade of the specialists. Virat Kohli, Charlie Munger, Steve Jobs, Shah Rukh Khan, Akshay Kumar, whatever it is. One of the key trends in the past decade is the rise of the specialist. The idea of specialization, though, is very old. It goes back almost 300 years to Adam Smith. But more recently, there's a good chance you heard about it with Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, where he talks about 10,000 hours of practice. So the question that most people ask us, the most popular question that we get is, what do you specialize in? The answer to that is a very simple framework that we found in a book by Robert Greene called Mastery. A very elegant framework and a very simple one. So he says that first you need to specialize in what you love, something that innately appeals to you. So find that. Second, once you find something that you love, find a guru, find a mentor, someone who can use, who can distill his many years of wisdom to help you to grow faster on the path. And third, once you've learned all this, go into the creative active mode and build your mastery. So we have so many examples of this kind of mastery. Charlie Munger at Berkshire Hathaway is one fine example. Someone that we thought is very apt for this is Ramdevji of Motilal Oswal, the co-founder. Extremely fascinating study. This is someone who comes from a very humble background, from a village in Raipur, did his college in Nagpur, came to Bombay then to build his dream. So he was very clear about two things in life. One was that he wanted to become rich. And two, he wanted to use investing to build that body of wealth. So he was clear about what he wanted to do. Next step, find a master, find a mentor. For him, it was Sanjay Bhattacharya and later on Warren Buffett. And third, he put that knowledge into action. Now, this goes back right to his college days where he would probably go to a restaurant or a small hotel, and in his mind, and this is the 90s that we're talking about, he could just visualize the number of people coming into the restaurant, the amount of time that they're staying on a table, the average cost that they would do, the expenses that the owner incurred, and build that entire profit and loss all in his head, right? And from there, he built that into a body of knowledge, and that helped him to invest in great businesses, and not only invest, but put large amounts of money. And that takes a very different type of, it takes a very different type of skill set. So that specialize. When we come to simplify, the key point out here is that we are all, we are all, in one way or the other, today we are all consumers of simplicity. The iPhone, for example, it probably costs less than $400, $500 to make, but it retails at a price of more than $1,000. And the gap between that is what is the value that Apple adds. You look at the iPhone, you look at McDonald's burgers, which are now so well known and popular all around the world because they deliver one product and deliver it consistently. In the investment world, you look at index funds, that Vanguard launched, or even in India, the concept of an SIP, the systematic investment plan, where you invest a small part of your monthly income into a mutual fund or into a stock and just let that run. You probably don't even realize that money is actually going into a mutual fund. So all of this is simplicity at a different level. So you might think that simplicity is easy. These products sound very simple, but creating this is not easy at all. And there are two ways to do it: simplification through process and simplification through principle. So simplification through process, through habit. We look at Krishna Deva Raya, who was a dominant ruler of the Deccan many, many years ago, and by far the mightiest ruler that the Deccan has seen. His routine was legendary, as Manu Pillai puts it in his book, and I quote, "Every morning he drank a 3/4 pint of sesame oil, after which he anoints himself all over with the same oil. He would then work out with great weights, exercise with a sword, and wrestle with one of his wrestlers till he sweats out the oil. And then he would go horse riding before daybreak, and finally, when it was time to appear in court, he would wear a tunic, a brocade cap, and seat himself on the diamond throne." Now, you and I might not be an Indian Maharaj, but extensive research shows that creating a routine is one of the most powerful keys to living a successful life. Then when we look at simplicity through principles, which is the more advanced level of simplicity, if you look at the way Saurabh and his colleagues manage money at Marcellus, it's an approach called consistent compounders, where they refuse to invest in companies that don't have a revenue growth of 10% and ROE of 15% year after year, not on a CAGR basis, but year after year. Marcellus only focuses on these companies that deliver these results as central to maintaining their discipline in investing. So whether it's the iPhone or the McDonald's burger or the SIP or the index funds, once these products hit the market, they just have this runaway success. Everyone thinks it's easy to make, but simplification actually through principles is the ultimate sophistication. That's it from me. For the rest of the presentation, I'll hand it over to Saurabh. Saurabh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anupam, and many thanks to Flame for hosting us today. Actually, we owe Flame a double thank you, not just for hosting us, but also because the concepts behind the Victory Project actually started getting germinated in Flame's campus a couple of years back when Durgesh Bhai invited me to attend the 3-day investment camp that Flame hosts for investors. So had it not been for that invitation from Flame 2 years back, perhaps we would have never even conceived of the book. But let me now focus on taking you guys through the remainder of the simplicity paradigm. Anupam's taken you through specialization and simplification. Let me finish off the foundational layer by focusing on spirituality. Right? It's easy to be cynical about spirituality, and I have to confess, I too was a cynic until I became a professional investor. That's when I realized there are no future facts. There are no future facts which can help my colleagues at Marcellus look after the monies of our clients, right? And spirituality, I realized, is the bridge between our abilities and applying that to the world around us, right? Let me become a little bit more specific about it. I don't know with certainty what will happen when the market opens on Monday next week, right? But rather than staying up all night and fretting about my lack of knowledge of the future, what I need to do is I need to control my mind and my emotions and stay as rational as possible, right? If I can get better at this, and if my colleagues can get better at this, we'll be better able to deal with fear and with greed, right? The investor who's articulated this most clearly is Ray Dalio. So if you read his book Principles, he says, the most valuable habit I've acquired is using pain to trigger quality reflections. If you can acquire this habit, says Mr. Dalio, if you can acquire this habit, you will learn what causes you pain and what you can do about it, and it will have an enormous effect on your effectiveness. Like Ray Dalio, there's another American fund manager, Jason Voss, who we interviewed for the book, who's also a deep believer in spirituality and how spirituality can help us make better investment decisions. Voss told us that meditation not only helps in relaxation and improving focus, it also helps you understand your family, your colleagues, and your friends' happiness. And you realize that the people around you, their happiness is actually far more important for your success than your own happiness. It's a very sort of ironic realization that the happiness of those around us is actually far more important for our success than our own happiness, right? In his book, Jason Voss explains that meditation basically heals your mind and lets you perform for better, for longer. I'll quote now from Jason Voss's books. You need to find tools and techniques that exalt your consciousness. You need to find polishing techniques that exalt your consciousness. Meditation practices are polishing techniques. Once you discover what makes you and your talents unique, that's only found through spirituality. Once you discover what makes you and your talents unique, all of a sudden magic happens, right? So that's the foundational layer of the simplicity paradigm. You start with your specialization, something that you innately like. Then you focus on simplification. Simplification, as Anupam explained, can be done through process, through routine, or simplification through principle. Simplification through principle is the ultimate sophistication. And then you bring in spirituality and spiritualization to help you deal with greed and fear, to help you realize that the me focus that the Indian education system drills into our head is perhaps not the best way to move forward in life, right? That's the foundational layer. Let's now move to the more advanced layers, the next layer of the simplicity paradigm, where the more advanced skills lie. And the first skill that we'll discuss in the more advanced layer of the simplicity paradigm is clutter reduction, right? And the reason we want to begin with clutter reduction is, as several of you would already guessed, right? Even if you meditate every day, if you can't manage your tasks and your workload and your projects, your system will go into stress due to cognitive overload, right? So you've got to make a conscious attempt to focus on what is really, really important. But that leads us to the question, well, how do we know what is important? Cal Newport has written 2 outstanding books on this subject, right? And closer home, studying the lives of business legends like Harsh Mariwala has shown us that there is actually a step-by-step process to reducing mental clutter. This process begins by being very, very clear about your goals. What do you want from life? This goal clarity sounds like a simple thing, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. I'll give you an example of a clear goal that another fund manager in California gave me last year. He told me, I focus on very few things: my family, my investors, and my closest colleagues. And I deprioritize everything else, right? That simplicity, that clarity leads to enormous clutter reduction. Once you have clarity on your goals, you can then start building prioritized checklists to help you with execution. And of course, Atul Gawande has written this very famous book on how to create checklists. The reason all of this is important, right? Reason goal clarity, the reason prioritized checklist is important is it frees up your memory. Much like a computer, if we clutter our brain with lots of different things, our memory gets jammed. If you free up your memory, memory plays a massive role in creativity. We'll discuss this a little bit further again. Memory plays a massive role in creativity. The more cluttered your mind, the less creative you're likely to be. And therefore, decluttering your mind ends up being a big priority. And there's something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which is shown in the book. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve has been created to show that the less cluttered your brain, the longer you retain memories, and memory in turn fosters creativity. So let's now move into creativity, right? The engine room of outsized success in a highly competitive free market economy, right? Given the world that we live in, even if our ideas are only marginally better than our peers, right, we will be in high demand. And that's actually very, very true in the context of financial markets. If you're marginally clearer in your thinking, your knowledge levels are marginally better, you will make disproportionately more money. Original thought becomes the key driver of wealth and success in our world. So, well then, how do we produce original thought? How can anyone produce genuinely original thought? Experts like Adam Grant, Doris Wallace, Howard Gruber have done extensive studies for decades on what drives creativity. And surprisingly, there's a list of 5 things which seem to be common across creative giants, across countries, across decades. The first of these 5 things is read widely. So Charlie Munger has famously said, he's never met a smart person who does not read widely. Every expert we interviewed for the book turned out to be a voracious reader, right? You'd expect Professor Sanjay Bakshi, Jason Voss, Ramdev Agarwal ji to be voracious readers, but even businessmen like Harsh Mariwala Saab, Sanjeev Bikhchandani ji, Apurva Purohit, she also turned out to be a voracious reader, right? It seems to be that voracious reading is a massively powerful skill, and across the experts, this turned out to be almost a key habit. For my part, I ask everybody that I meet what their favorite books are. I then curate that list, and I have to confess, I spend almost all my free time reading. It's a step 1 of outsized creativity by reading widely. Second is explore the world, right? Travel extensively, meet people from a variety of religions and cultures in our own country, go through a variety of experiences. I think, as Manish very kindly said in my introduction, most of what I learned before I became an investor came from doing various odd jobs as a teenager, backpacking holidays, and friendships formed in the betting shops and bank branches where I worked through my teens and my early 20s. Step 3, enhance your memory. People who have developed their memories to a very high level have learned how to focus their attention on essential information. There are specific memory enhancing techniques which are worth learning. We've given a summary in the book, but you can easily find them on the internet. Memory and creativity very tightly linked. Fourthly, work hard and produce lots of ideas, right? Almost all creative giants have a very high output rate. So in the book, we've cited that Oscar-winning film director Satyajit Ray directed 36 movies in a 35-year career. And many of these movies are treasures of world cinema, cornerstones of Indian culture. A friend of mine told me a day before yesterday that Woody Allen has directed some 35 movies in a 36-year career as well. And out of those 35 movies, 22 have been nominated for an Oscar, right? And this seems to be a common trait that we're increasingly finding. Creative giants have a very high output rate. And finally, fifthly, make friends. Jam with other creatives, find allies, find people who can give you emotional support, intellectual support, and practical help. We see almost all these qualities in Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the founder of InfoEdge, the founder of Naukri.com. And we found that this is a man who's defied convention at almost every step of his career, from his college days through to building Naukri.com. And as a result, what you see with Sanjeev Bikhchandani is an incredibly creative mind at work, right? I don't mind saying that some of the ideas behind how to build Marcellus came from a 1-hour chat over coffee with Sanjeev a couple of years back. Incredibly creative guy. Right, let's move to the next part of the final part of the simplicity paradigm, right? Collaboration. No matter how creative you are, if you want to change the world with your ideas, you need to learn how to influence other people and win their support and collaboration in favor of your cause. Right? By yourself, you're not going to be taking the idea very far. You need to work with a broader team. What's most interesting we found in our research is that the greatest teams are actually teams of rivals, which means these are teams of diverse sets of people who might not always agree with each other. They might not get along with each other, but they're willing to work towards a common goal, right? And the most famous examples of this are Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War cabinet that he built, the cabinet which basically dragged America out from the ashes of the Civil War of 1860-61. And there's a famous book on that by a lady called Doris Kearns Goodwin on Abraham Lincoln and his team of rivals. And closer home, Gandhiji and the first post-independence cabinet that India built under Gandhiji's guidance. He brought people like Sardar Patel and Baba Saheb Ambedkar together in that cabinet. These were fierce political rivals, Patel and Ambedkar, and Gandhiji united them in the common cause of building the country and common cause of creating the constitution which governs our lives to this day. When we met Manish Sabharwal of TeamLease to discuss this subject of collaboration, he took us through how a diverse group of characters has built his firm, built TeamLease. And he used a lovely metaphor. He used the metaphor of Hoysala architecture, which dates back 900 years and can be seen in the temples of Belur in Karnataka. So Manish told us that the sculptures in these temples include lions signifying power, elephants signifying strength, and horses indicating speed. And what a good king did was to ensure that his kingdom has lions and elephants and horses, because no animal by itself is enough. The combination is what makes for a great kingdom. And if you want to be inspired by collaboration on an epic scale, you don't have to look very far. Verghese Kurian built Amul from a firm which was literally nothing in 1948 to a firm which is 3 times the size of Nestle India today. So Nestle India's market cap is about $22 billion. So had Amul been listed, you can just take a guess as to how large the wealth creation would be. Amul is collaboration on an epic scale. The Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation's daily procurement of milk is 2.3 crore liters from more than 19,000 village milk cooperatives, which in turn are fed milk by 36 lakh milk producing members on a daily basis. Mind-blowing stuff. And there's a lovely biography of Verghese Kurian Saab, which you can read to and appreciate the great man's contribution to our country. So let's now pull it all together, right? The simplicity paradigm has two layers of skills, right? The first layer is building positive behavioral habits like specialization and simplicity, which become the foundations of your career. And the second layer focuses on building more advanced skills like creativity, like collaboration. There are millions of hardworking and ambitious people in our country, but only a select few will have the discipline to adopt the simplicity paradigm in a systematic manner, right? And a lot of people believe that in the creative professions, music, art, advertising, that lives can be lived in a bohemian manner. Nothing could be further from the truth. So there are two famous music directors whose lives exemplify the simplicity paradigm. R.D. Burman and A.R. Rahman both started training as musicians in their early teens, right? Both became professional musicians by their mid-teens, and both broke away from conventional paradigms to create path-breaking music. With Teesri Manzil in 1966 and Amar Prem in 1972, R.D. Burman made music the centerpiece of Indian cinema, right, of Hindi cinema. Basically, what we call the item number today goes back to Teesri Manzil. The big budget blockbuster song and dance sequence owes a lot to Burman Saab, right? A.R. Rahman's Roja, which was his breakthrough movie, is still rated by Time magazine as one of the top 10 movie soundtracks of all time. Both of these men worked long hours with an intense focus on perfection. And most importantly, right, most importantly, both befriended the leading producers and film directors of their time and excelled in collaboration, right? Just this morning, my wife and I were discussing, why did O.P. Nayyar not rise to the heights of, say, an S.D. Burman or R.D. Burman? And my wife reminded me, one of the things with O.P. Nayyar was he regularly fought with other co-stars, with Lata Mangeshkar, with Mohammad Rafi. R.D. Burman, S.D. Burman didn't do that. They mingled and and convince the Bollywood elite of the 60s and 70s of the merits of their music, and became legends, right? So with that, folks, the trilogy of books that we have worked on for the past 6 years comes to an end. We have tried to understand the drivers of greatness in this trilogy of books. We began with corporate greatness. In The Unusual Billionaires, we profiled a very unique set of companies that delivered outstanding financial performance, that deliver, actually present tense, that deliver outstanding financial performance year after year. We translated these guardrails for outstanding performance into a simple set of investing rules, which can guide portfolio construction. That's what Coffee Can Investing did. And we showed that these simply constructed portfolios can unlock enormous financial gains for millions of investors. And now we've finished this trilogy with an overarching philosophy to live great lives. We believe, in spite of everything that's happened in the last 5 months, and in spite of the various hurdles thrown at us by this great country, we can live fulfilling lives by following the simplicity paradigm. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. And thank you very much to Flame as well for both the opportunity 2 years ago to talk about it, and finally the opportunity today to highlight it. I also want to highlight that the coincidence that this morning I logged on to Amazon. The Victory Project is number one in the management bestseller list. And I'm telling Manish Bhai how ironic it is that talking on the Flame forum today, 2 years from the time we first discussed it in front of the Flame Monsoon Lab. Thank you very much.
That was really wonderful, Saurabh and Anupam. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure not just the participants here who are listening in, but many others who we've tweeted about and so on. While you don't do it, a lot of your friends and followers do it. So you're sure people will do that. I'll do one more plug for you. A lot of people, I remember when we were much younger, and this book is not very old. 4 years ago, who does a very famous podcast, wrote Tools of Titans. And in a sense, it was something distant because this were people out there in a kind of American environment doing it. And therefore, for you to kind of bring this subject home, closer to home, to people we can relate to in our environment, is that much more believable and palpable. So thank you for doing that and letting us also feel, we got Titans as well in our country. So thank you. I'll just kick off with 1 or 2 questions, and I think I will then hand off to Tejas, having done 1 or 2, because he has a longer question queue, I think, and he may be able to curate it better than me. The first one I wanted to ask, how much of this do you think is more personality specific as opposed to, what you can apply to an organization? So I'll just I'm rolling in 2 or 3 things together. For example, we all know Steve Jobs was by all accounts a terrible person to be your manager or your leader. Mm-hmm. And yet he built one of the most iconic companies. So that's kind of one dimension. A second person we all admire and who works with first principles and simplicity is Elon Musk. And whatever he does is kind of back to first principles, and he builds from there. And yet the guy is tweeting all the time, and his mind seems to be like, handling 100 different things at the same time. And the third dimension is a lot of this is to do with individuals. And yet we as investors are more interested in people who can not just tell us the time, but really build the clock. Awesome. So maybe if you could try and put these disparate things together, you could take a shot at it and let Anupam also take a shot at it.
Yeah. So let me try. So I think what you've hit upon is something really, really central. I think there are 3 myths which fuel a lot of thinking in contemporary time. The first is the myth of the great leader, that Apple is basically Steve Jobs' baby, and without Steve Jobs, Apple wouldn't be what it is. Right? Similarly, the perception would be that HDFC Bank will not be what it is without Aditya Puri Saab, and so on, right? And in a way, people like us fuel that, writers like us fuel that myth, that story creation, that because of the hero, the company succeeds, right? But as we've discussed in Unusual Billionaires, and as we've tried to elaborate in the collaboration chapter of this book, it's only when the individual allows himself to be subsumed in a larger collective that his talents find full fruition. So just to give a very prosaic example, whoever climbs Mount Everest, Edmund Hillary, Tenzing Norgay, whilst they are the people who come in the newspaper that so and so climbed Everest, there's obviously an enormous group of people who got them there, including, and I keep thinking of it, the same the Nepali porters they must have gone up to Everest 50 times, but they never come on the cover of New York Times. Some other person makes it, right? So the media and people like us and investors like us lionize the CEO and the hero, but obviously behind that is a remarkable story. And one of the nicest things about the Apple's success in the post-Jobs era under Steve, under his successor, right, has been the fact that it's somewhat diluted the myth that Apple is what it is just because of Steve Jobs. In fact, I think Apple's market cap has more than doubled since the great man's demise, right? I think the other element to think about it is think of India's Marwadi community, right? There are, I think, 8 or 9 million Marwadis in India. They are by far the most influential business community in our country, Manish Bhai. And I don't think the Marwari community elects annually or 5-year cycle. They don't elect a leader saying he or she will now take us to the promised land. The Marwadis are perpetually successful, and it's a very collaborative community, right? And we've brought out some of that in the book, but I've seen that in my 12 years in Bombay. I've seen how the Marwadi community helps each other move up in the world. And that's an example of collaboration on a large scale without a leader, and yet it's very, very powerful. Anupam, your thoughts?
So it's interesting. You mentioned Elon Musk because he tweets obsessively, and Manish, here's the thing: Elon Musk's learning capacity is legendary. It's a topic of a lot of blogs, and he had done this very famous AMA on Reddit. I don't know if Saurabh knows what Reddit is, because Reddit is part of social media that we say avoid. But I'll just to take away a little bit of that. So here's what he said, because he was asked this question, exactly this question: how in God's name are you able to have such massive absorption capacity? And he said, the first thing he said is, a lot of us actually sell ourselves short. This power to learn is available to everybody on this planet, and we've hoped that we can. We have spoken about this in the book also. So learning to learn, for example. So here's what he said. One bit of advice: it is important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, that is the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves or the details, or there's nothing to hang on to. So if you just focus on what he said and then figure out how he's built his organization, like Saurabh said, the organization will always outlast the individual. And that's the case for Steve Jobs. Then he handed over to Tim Cook. Apple has a $2 trillion. Now imagine a company that had a $1 trillion market cap just 2 years ago. To double that is kind of, as we say, mind explode, So it kind of beats the law of large numbers. So there is a process. There is a way that you can do it. And if an individual does it and probably, shares it with his team, then the organization can rise up to that level and everybody can benefit.
So thanks for that. I just want to do a quick follow on that. If, is this now, we are putting correlation on these people, or in other words, do the people who became titans or so successful, were they already following these principles, or we are kind of doing it post facto and then fitting it into our formula?
So I think here I've always found this, and I went through a lot of this soul searching when I was younger as well. So here I've always told myself, I've narrated back to myself what Leo Tolstoy said in that famous opening line of Anna Karenina. He said, all happy families are alike. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Right? Yeah. So therefore, the way I put it is, all successful people are actually alike, right? Now, how are they alike? How are all successful people alike? As I said, Charlie Mangarwala quote, right? He says, all smart people you have met, they read, right? Now, I'm also trying to find some smart people who don't read, but it's not very easy at all.
But you should clarify, just because you read won't make you smart.
But it can't help, money. It can't hurt. It can't hurt. Wherever you are, आपका baseline move हो जाएगा. This is about peak potential, right? So whatever your potential is, reading enhances it. The second one, which we quoted in the book, is this guy V.S. Pritchett, the British novelist V.S. Pritchett. He said, once you study the lives of great people, you realize they're all fundamentally similar. They basically don't waste a minute of their time, right? All day they're doing something or other. So they read, they don't waste a minute of their time, right? So that's the sort of broad ballpark, that the broad guiding posts we had, right? So we then worked backwards and said, what else defines greatness, right? And Robert Greene's book Mastery, right? Robert Greene's book Mastery, I think is very, very helpful, especially for people who are in their 20s. So this guy very neatly spells it out. In a way, it's ironic that people like us are learning these from Western books, but because what Robert Greene lays out is the Guru Shishya Parampara. He says, find a guru, choose your specialization, and then find a guru. Let the guru teach you basically a lifetime of condensed wisdom. He drills into your head in a way what a university like Flame also, I suppose, does. And then once you've built your own skill set, branch out on your own, practice your discipline for 10 years, and then you'll find yourself hitting Elon Musk levels of mastery, right? So all that we did was we condensed.
I'm glad because you touch on what is really Indian spirituality and the Upanishad, that you're here in a sense for some purpose. If you can find that early in life and then you're here to go and explore. I think you explain it in your book also where Sanjay Bakshi talks of.
I was just going to put that. He says that literally every behavioral finance thing that you can think of, loss aversion and endowment theory, everything
is all there.
Is out there. You're right.
So we are here in this journey to find our own unique path. And I remember as a youngster when I was starting out, you read about successful investors and before that successful business people and so on. And there was, of course, the George Soros direction, Warren Buffett direction, and so many shades in between.
Yes, sir.
Peter Lynch is just go and buy what your wife shops at and so on.
Yes.
So there could be like 100 ways to go to heaven, which is really the Gita says also, like there are 4 or 5 ways that you may go through Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga and so on. And eventually you got to find, is Raj Yoga working for you and so on. So I kind of get it. Let me not, otherwise I'll get into a philosophical discussion. Let me ask Tejas, in fact, to take over the Q&A, because I see we have 500 odd people listening in, and there already seem to be lots of questions. So I'm going to remove myself from the video screen so you all can focus on the 2 authors over here.
Thank you. Thank
you, sir. Thank you, Manish Bhai.
Thank you, Manish Bhai. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Anupam. Just a note, we have, as Manish Bhai said, a lot of questions, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. Just to now continue with the conversation, Saurabh and Anupam, coming to Elon Musk, I think one of the questions that a participant has asked is, in this age of AI and machine learning, etc., the edge that you get from decluttering or from temperamental advantage or holding on to your emotions, does that lessen? Does that go away with this kind of move towards AI and machine learning?
Well, I'll have a crack if you don't mind, Anupam, and then I'll request you to give your inputs. My reckoning is that as machines increasingly do the more quantitative aspects and the more routine-oriented aspects of what human beings are capable of, as machines increasingly take over the routine-oriented aspects of professional life, the spiritual aspect, the qualitative aspect actually becomes even more important, right? So I doubt 10 years from now, fund houses like Marcellus will be hiring an analyst to say, please read this annual report and give me a 200-word summary, right? I'm pretty confident 10 years from now, there'll be an off-the-shelf algo that a Bloomberg or a Reuters will basically add into their standard package, which will give you crisp summaries of annual reports. And therefore, 10 years from now, what the analyst will be required to do is read 6 different annual reports in the sector and come up with nonlinear insights on where is the sector going or where are the companies going. So as the sort of process-oriented skill sets that our brain contains are increasingly taken over by machines in the coming decades, the spiritual aspect, the qualitative aspect will become, I'm very, very confident, will become more important. The last liberal art aspect of finance, right? Why did Flame get created? Why are universities like Flame not only getting created, why are they attracting good students? Because people are realizing that just by doing a chartered accountancy qualification, I'm not going to become a great investor. I need a greater overlay of qualitative skills as well. I think that aspect of the human mind will become far more important. And therefore, spirituality, collaboration, creativity become central. Mark Mobius talks about this quite extensively in our book. Mark Mobius says that a decade out, a lot of what we do today, robots will be doing. And therefore, we have to do more creative, more qualitative stuff. Anupam, your thoughts?
Not much to add there. Sort of just a couple of things. So first is when we had met Manish Sabharwal, we presented this argument to him that life today is quite difficult, and he just scoffed at it. He just said that presentism, as he calls it, dates back to the Parthenon. I mean, the guy is such a well-read person that he could actually remember the quote and put it in context. Here's the thing, Tejas. And I'll take this quote from Jeff Bezos, who said that everybody wants to know what's going to change tomorrow, what's going to change next year, what's going to change after 2 years. Nobody asks what's going to stay the same for 10 years. Okay, so you look at when the horse cart went and the car came, people just switched, but the need to drive from A place to B place remained. Today, there is technology, but you still ask people where to invest. Because reviews don't go. Trust hasn't changed. The format has changed. So certain core concepts will never change. It might have a different, people don't stop eating because restaurants have come or because restaurants are closed. They still eat food. The format has changed. So I think if you keep these core principles in mind, and we've spoken about this in the book, you should be sorted whether AI comes, whether machine language comes.
I should just remind you guys, you all had a couple of very interesting poll questions. This may be an interesting time to poll the audience, so you'll get some of those things thrown up as well.
I have no idea whether poll. Okay, here it is.
Yes.
Check. And I tell you, people check WhatsApp and they're having a cup of coffee with friends. I mean, what? I certainly hope they're not doing this right now.
So I think in a way, if they are, it's all right, no? Because it means that the book is required, right?
Who knows, Saurabh? Our book might be, put on the PDF of our book might spread via WhatsApp. Who knows? That's the way people.
I'll be happy if people are doing WhatsApp or watching the presentation. It means that there is a market for what we are doing.
Yeah. I guess. Tejas, anything,
Well, the poll shows that a lot of people are intrigued by the presentation. Which is good. I would have expected. I would have expected a different one. So, which is amazing. Great. I'm gonna ask a question that is. So we have a wide range of people here. Some people are asking, if I'm a younger side, what is the advice you would give, etc., etc. But victory means different for different people, and obviously, victory and success in this books are of people that have reached a different or leadership levels at their particular industries that they are in. What advice would you give to somebody in terms of what is a personal victory is? What is a victory for you, or what is a victory for Anupam, and how do you get there?
Anupam, you want to begin?
I don't know. Yeah, Saurabh. I mean, when I look at professional victory, the definition has changed. When I stepped into the sell-side industry, I would say that working for a top-tier brokerage firm is as big as it gets. That's victory for me just there. Writing a report and being right on a stock, giving the right recommendation, that's it. That's victory for me out there. So I did that phase. And then, this last decade of mine, something as obscure, something as vague as having my own podcast, hitting 250 episodes and just getting so much of love and admiration and support from listeners, massive victory for me. So I think I think victory is an outcome, Tejas. I would look at the process and say that, is this giving me joy? Is this really helping me to grow as a person meaningfully? And people kind of have this romantic idea that I'll wake up in the morning and sunlight aega, ye hoga, and I'll be singing and dancing, and I'll have a cup of coffee, it'll be raining, I can take the day off. I'm sorry, that probably works somewhere. But if you don't have a routine every day, literally for all 24 hours in a day, it's not, and that is contributing to your progress in some way, professionally, personally. I think that daily process is a victory. Victory then becomes an outcome, whichever way you look at it. That's for me. Sorry.
So there's a 1971 movie, right? Famous Rajesh Khanna movie, where he walks on Juhu Beach, and it's a famous song, Zindagi, and it's a Manna Dey song. And from a very early age, I think I was 14, 15. There's a line from that song which keeps coming back to me year after year through my life. So it says, एक दिन सपनों का राही चला जाए सपनों से आगे कहाँ, right? So victory is for everybody. I think for everybody, when you leave, you attain whatever you dreamt of, and then you go on beyond that, right? When there are no more worlds to conquer, to quote another book, when there are no more worlds to conquer, that is victory. And until that day, I think all of us, individually, as a collective, I think keep striving. And in a way, as Anupam describes, right, this is the journey that makes life worth living. It's why you wake up in the morning, you have dreams, you aspire to hit those dreams, you hit those dreams, you cross those dreams, then you move on beyond those dreams, and that's what makes life such a wonderful journey. So you can draw inspiration from Hindi cinema, you can draw inspiration from Western philosophy, but as long as you keep pursuing your dreams, you keep hitting them, and then you dream ahead again. That is victory, and the journey itself is delicious, it's beautiful, and it's worth living.
Yeah, lots of pop culture. I'll take mine from Eminem. I don't know if people have heard of. I'm hoping people have heard of Eminem. He just says you can make something of your life. Just depends on your drive. So when Eminem was what he was, his lyrics and his rapping, that's it. That's victory out there.
So I think on that context, Anupam, you might want to share that doom scrolling wala piece, right? We had loads of doom scrolling through Corona. I think you should share your insights on that.
Yeah, I don't know how that works out there. People are just just fascinated with obsessing about bad news and just wanting to learn more and more and more about it, because it's just this atmosphere of doom that's there for the last 6 months. It doesn't have to be there. You are what you consume, and that applies for food and it applies for media. If you're someone who chooses to be constantly on WhatsApp and keeping on hearing ki aaj isko ho gaya, aaj usko ho gaya, ye building seal ho gaya, wo ho gaya, how is that going to help you? It's like New York State's governor Andrew Cuomo. You just look at his feed on Twitter. Follow the science, follow the math, wear a mask, social distance. You're done. Honestly, you can't do anything more than that. Consuming this bad news is not going to help you. Vaccine kab aayega, ye kab hoga. That doom scrolling, I just wish that people could just get over that and focus, and consume the media properly, sort of.
And in that context, Tejas, then victory becomes getting off social media, leaving the world of doom scrolling behind and living your own life, right? So victory can be something as prosaic as, shutting down your social media accounts and living a life without doom scrolling. Back to you, Tejas.
I think a lot of the initial part of the book that I read was you putting up two examples of two individuals in different parts of their career.
A lot of our lives are there in that, by the way, huh, Tejas?
Exactly, right? And challenges that come about is relativity, right? You're comparing yourself to somebody else, and that leads to defeat, if I may, right? Which is the opposite of what we just described. A lot of people are asking, how do you deal with mental challenges through this book? And especially in the time of COVID, there's a lot of mental challenges that are out there. One is your professional mental challenge, and now there are others as well. So how would your framework help with that?
So I call this the uski kameez mere kameez se safed problem, right? So today Tejas is wearing a safed kameez, and yours is whiter than mine. But more metaphorically speaking, I think all of us perpetually suffer from this, right? The neighbor's car is better, the neighbor might be earning more, or something about my friend's life is better. The uski kameez mere kameez se safed problem, and how have I dealt with it? How we've dealt with it? I think I'll sort of come at it from two angles. At one level, we have to be honest. I have to be honest. Whatever I've done in life, I've said I'll try to be the best I can. So when Anupam and I set out to write this book 2 years ago, we said this will be the #1 bestseller on Amazon, right? So you try to be the best that you can, but once you've set the goal and you've you set upon a path, you don't say, well, हमारी किताब आज इतनी बिक रही है. How much is Morgan Housel की आने वाली किताब कितनी बिक रही है, right? You don't get into these comparisons. You've had your goal, you've set your goal, you've done the best you can, you put the best book that you could out in the market, and now you let the market decide, right? You don't then anguish about the fact that Morgan Housel का book #1 हो गया या किसी और का हो गया, right? So there's agonizing about outcomes, which is I think completely futile, and there is agonizing and pushing yourself to deliver the best possible product, the process, right? And pushing yourself hard on the process, which I think is a completely worthwhile thing. So as long as we are very clear about it, there's no point saying his book has sold more than my book and that's therefore we'll be jealous. But there is a lot of point in saying we will put together the best book that we can. There's no point in my saying so-and-so has garnered more assets than Marcellus, so let's feel jealous. But there is a lot of point in we at Marcellus will do absolutely the best we can as a team to put the best results out there. Our investment process will be the most rigorous, and then the results will take care of itself. So agonizing about outcomes versus agonizing about process, agonizing about outcomes, pardon my saying so, very American thing to do. I don't like it. Agonizing about process, love it. It's what makes life worth living. Anupam?
3 things, Tejas. So since you asked specifically about mental challenges in this very difficult time, 3 things. One is that the opposite of doom scrolling is also possible. You could actually go into Google and just type mental resources to cope with the crisis, and you will be amazed with the kind of stuff that is out there from the CDC. Every reputed organization, the HBR has a fantastic article, CDC has some great tips. There's just this very simple line of tips of how to cope with mental stress and anxiety. Humanity is facing this together. You are not alone. Okay. And there's a tremendous amount of resources out there. Choose wisely though, okay, because there's a lot of slightly, off people also. There's a thing of social media. So choose wisely, look at those resources and there are psychologists, counselors putting up 5-6 minute videos every week telling you this is how you deal with this is empathy, this is how to make yourself mentally tough, this is focus. Okay, so that's one thing which you can actually use to help you. Second is, we've spoken about in this book, meditation. Okay, meditation and sleep are critical. Dr. Sharmila Banwar told us about 3 things totally that people are getting wrong these days: eating, sleeping, and introspection. You eat right, have a routine. You sleep right, have a routine. And she said introspection. When the day is over, just give yourself 5 minutes to introspect how the day went. That's it from my side. This is a small, very, very, very practical tips. I'll just repeat them. Look for resources on the net, meditation and sleep. And yes, obviously, I forgot. Physical exercise. I cannot emphasize this more. Just get as much of it as you can. That's it.
Thank you. There's a question which actually you have also referred in your book about generalists and specialists, and you have the Malcolm Gladwell outliers, and then you have range. And there's a question that is coming up about specialists versus generalists. How would you balance the two? I know the answer is in the book. Maybe you can just give a sneak peek into the person that's asking the question as well.
I think so. The clue is the letter T, right? So the letter T, and we owe this analogy to David Epstein and his fabulous book range. So what Epstein very nicely spells out is that outside success is, you obviously have to specialize. You can't say, one day a month I will manage money, and other 29 days I'll play the guitar. It doesn't work, right? So you have to have specialization. But you also have to combine that with a wide range of knowledge and a wide range of influences. So Epstein says success basically is the letter T. Your base of knowledge is as broad as the horizontal part of the letter T. And then your specialization is the stem of the letter T. And we've discussed Bruce Lee as a case study, right? Bruce Lee, obviously famous martial arts fighter. But until we researched him for the book, we didn't realize he was also a fencing guru, Western style fencing guru. He was also deeply spiritual. He wrote several books. He's written I think the number 2 and number 1 and number 2 best-selling martial arts book ever written by Bruce Lee's. He set up martial arts schools from the age of 18 or 19. And obviously, as we know him, he became a famous movie star, Enter the Dragon and all that. So multifaceted character, knew how to do a range of things. He chose to focus on fighting as a specialization, and he made himself a legend in that regard. Anupam?
Not really much to add out there, Saurabh. I think that's quite comprehensive.
The other question that's coming about is the noise that you have in today's world, where we are just fed with information at all times. And you're living in this information world. How, I know you said decluttering meditation is very important. Is there a particular process or anything that you can direct people to kind of help focus on the important parts and remove the noise?
So look, I think as you have said in the book, and as we try to practice in our day-to-day lives, if not for any other reason, for sheer practicality, you try to cut out of your life, events, social media, people, responding to emails that you don't need to. You try to minimize a lot of what you do with your life, right? Because if you don't do that minimization and you're available to everybody and everything all the time, you genuinely will go into cognitive overload, and clarity of thought then disappears. So if I had to sort of put this in a very simple fashion, there's 2 things that you try to lock in together. First is clutter reduction. So clutter reduction, both in terms of practical possessions, clutter reductions in terms of the company you keep, and clutter reductions in terms of how much news you absorb. So I've stopped reading newspapers a while back, and I have a certain routine in the morning where I scan a few websites, and that's it. That's all I do in terms of news flow. So you reduce clutter in your life, in your brain, in your possessions, and you live as minimal a life as you can. I have to confess, in the days we used to go to office, I wear the same 5 shirts every week. I don't even apply my brain on what shirt to wear. So it's the same 5 shirts, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I wear the same socks, I wear the same shoes. So it's a very mechanical process. And I find that it enormously helps me just get my mind decluttered. The other part is the routine, right? Creating a routine. So when we were researching the book, we were astonished to learn that even people like musicians, A.R. Rahman, R.D. Burman, painters, artists, people we thought would be living incredibly bohemian lives, party life, even they, it turns out, live very structured, very routine-oriented lives. Publicly, they create a facade of full party chal raha hai, but behind the facade, it's a structured routine. And what routines and habit do is, again, they take away from your mental processor any load around at what time of the day, what do I do, right? Create a structured routine, whether lockdown is happening or doesn't happening. Honestly, after a while, it makes no difference to you, lockdown chal raha hai ya nahi chal raha, because you're living your routine life. It's just that you've changed your routine to accommodate the realities of the locked up world. Anupam?
So I have a slightly different view from Saurabh, right? Because I feel that decluttering is great once you figure out what you want to declutter and what you don't need at all. That takes some level of clarity, but once you've got it, it's great. Then you need to live with some of the clutter you can't get away with. For example, nobody says that you have to, and we've said it in the book, nobody says that you have to give your life story on WhatsApp. I call karo na, there is a call. Just call the person. When you're talking, it's amazing. People just have this habit of going on. So I don't do that. If I'm using WhatsApp, it's a 1-line thing. Okay, meet you at so and so place, call you at so and so place. That's it. मेरे को और नहीं बात करने का है. माफ करो मुझे. Okay. If I'm using Twitter and I am on Twitter, I use it for bursts of time. I keep all notifications off. Good Lord, notifications is so shut notifications. Have to use Twitter. Have certain time windows. Use it. Third is technology itself is the solution. There are enough apps on focus, on screen time. Use them for God's sake and figure out where your time is going. 24 hours is a massive amount of time, a humongous amount of time every day. Figure it out. The routine is very important.
I think in a way, the process of writing this book for both of y'all with your professional challenges and lives, and doing this at the side. If you can just take us through how you decluttered that part to focus on this, maybe that can give some insights to people as well.
So I'll go first. I'll let Saurabh, follow, because Saurabh is actually, so Saurabh has much more structure, much more routine, and he's lived a very, kind of, flow chart kind of life. This, mine is chaos. Mine is total chaos. I left a formal job in 2013. Uske baad, how my day starts, how it gets over is absolutely, there's no structure to that. The key is to find time to do focus. So I would be writing this at 2 o'clock in the night. If my entire day goes somewhere else, I'm very clear that this is the amount of time that I have to write. This is my target. If I've told Saurabh that this chapter will be complete on so and so day by so and so time, then that's it. If I finish it earlier, I reward myself. I'll just probably chill out at 2 o'clock on a weekday afternoon and watch Netflix. Something that's unimaginable to people who are working. But the ability to manage your time within those 24 hours is the key to pretty much your entire life. So I think that's it from my side. Saurabh, I think, will have a more structured answer.
Well, look, I mean, basically we would give each other targets, right? We would say, so we basically planned the book out after that Flame seminar 2 years back. I can remember I came back from there I went to meet my parents in the UK, but 2 weeks later when I was back, Anupam and I sat down in Lower Parel in a coffee shop, and I said, they go, people seem to think there's something there. People are interested in the subject. So we chalked out 6 different subjects to write about. And it so happened that a Bangalore-based website reached out and asked us to write. They said, "Kuch bhi likho, aap jo aapko theek lage likho." So we ended up writing a 6-part series, perhaps a 7-part series for the Ken. And so the first round of development of the ideas was done as we wrote for the Ken. And we used to write, I think, 1 piece a month, which was all right. I think 1 piece a month over 7-8 months is doable. And we would set each other deadlines. So for my part, my portion of the homework assignment that was given to me, so to speak, I would read the books over the weekend, and then over Monday to Friday, I would write on flights. I find it quite easy to write on flights. I find it hard to read on flights. So I would read over the weekend and I would write on the flights, and then we would meet once a month on a Saturday over several cups of coffee. And
I can't do anything on a flight except watch a movie up front. Okay, I'm going to call it up front. Mere se nahi hota hai. I would just saying it up there. Just one thing to add there, Tejas. Saurabh, I'm sorry if you're over.
No, sir, go for it.
So I'm saying, so Tejas, here's the thing. You have to find, if you can tune your mind to find hidden joys in something that's very, that you find is drudgery, right? So every time that we would meet a guest, we would be spending at the minimum 1 hour. If we got lucky, we would have 3 hours. And when you meet someone like Sanjeev Bikhchandani in his basement in Delhi and you spend 3 hours with him, your entire mind is focused towards that. Thankfully, we carried recorders. Okay, obviously with the permission of the guest.
Yeah.
Transcribing that, okay, which would seem like pain to anybody. I'm telling you, transcribing is hajar pain. Believe me, you're hearing from here and you're typing, okay? And I know there are apps for it, okay? I have Otter and it's actually quite easy. But the transcription makes it, you relive the entire thing all over again, new aspects open. So if you're doing something that you find a terrible waste on your time creatively, find different angles to it. I think that's what worked for me.
Got it. I think for the interest of time, we'll take 2 more, if that's okay, Saurabh and Anupam. One of the things is there any contradictory idea in your framework or contradictory principles where simplicity is on one hand, but success or spirituality or profit making is? When you guys were writing or thinking about it, was there a logjam in your mind that, what you're talking about spirituality, you're talking about simplicity, but on the other hand, there is profit making, and with profit making, there are a lot of other things that come into play. Was there ever thought about or ever came to your mind?
So obviously there are if we look at the world around us, right, and if you ask us as well, if it's so easy to achieve peak potential, why isn't everybody reading the book or reading something similar and achieving peak potential? And the answer lies, I think, as the questioner, I think whoever's asked this question, lovely question, and the answer lies in in conflicting forces. So, for example, the two conflicts which I think which hit us the hardest when we tried to write was the collaboration wala piece, right? Is it the great leader versus is it the great leader that makes the overall enterprise successful, or is it the leader's ability to subsume his identity in the team and then build a great team around him? Is that what makes it successful, right? So there's always a tussle there. That is, as you were discussing, is HDFC Bank what it is because of Aditya Puri Saab, or is Aditya Puri Saab merely the face of HDFC Bank, and itself it's a great organization with thousands of other people, other stars who are unsung, right? So that tension is always prevalent in any construct, whether it's the Indian cricket team, whether it's the housing society I live in, or whether it's a great company like HDFC Bank, or indeed whether it's a great country like the United States, right? So the team versus the individual. Our conclusion there is that if you want to achieve outsized success, you have to subsume yourself in a larger collective. The collective could be a university, it could be the society around you, it could be the country around you, it could be your company. But as long as you have this me mindset, you'll never be able to do full justice to your talents. The other aspect of success, and we've tried to bring this out, is the tussle between being focused, being decluttered versus being creative. So people like Khushwant Singh have written at length, and we've quoted the great author. He said, "Ye sab bakwas hai, spirituality वगैरह ये सब बकवास है. You basically need a nice Scotch whiskey, and you need some josh, and you can write like a god, right? So ye sab chodo, right?" And I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, Indian cricketers used to behave like that. They used to go out and ek do chauke chhakke maro, and then the middle stump would go cartwheeling, and you'd look at the scoreboard, would be 34 for 5, and the Australians would be all over us, right? And in the last 20 years, Saurav Ganguly, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble, Dhoni, Virat Kohli, they have instilled in the team a sense of purpose, discipline, focus, that you got to hold it together, you got to hold your nerve, you got to hold your game together when the chips are down. You can't just be emotionally buffeted around by the opposition, and we are a stronger cricket team for that. So this very romantic view in Indian life, and perhaps romantic view in artistic circles, that creating great art, great books, great movies, great music, coming up with formulas like Albert Einstein, is all about thoda sa josh, thoda sa inspiration, little bit of perspiration. But what we learned whilst thinking the creativity piece through is, creativity is a very rigorous endeavor, right? You make 36 movies, which is what Satyajit Ray did, and you get 1 Oscar, right? But if you don't make 36 movies because you say, yeah, I'll wait for that one perfect movie, it doesn't come, right? So creativity is an endeavor around repeated attempts, hard work, lots of reading, lots of experience, rather than a endeavor around Josh and Farosh, which was the traditional view that Khushwant Singh Saab espoused in his era.
I think so. People can just read the halo effect. That should give them an idea about how, idol worshipping and all that might just put you onto something. But the only thing that I'd like to add to what Saurabh said is that different things might work for different people, but the core principles will hardly change. You could choose not to believe in spirituality. You could enjoy your life for 5 days a week and do nothing. You could drink, some of the most famous musicians, some of the most creative people have been serious substance abusers. And the body of work has been phenomenal. And that's not to take away from them. But at some point of time in their careers, there's a very good chance that they would have followed a routine. If they've, if they've partied for 5 days, the work they do in 2 days on the weekend would be something that blows us all apart. So you might choose to not agree on certain parts, but it's very difficult to find a very successful person who hasn't implemented all or at least most of what we've spoken about.
Thank you. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Anupam. I think we'll conclude the session here. We've got a lot of requests. If we can share your presentation to them at a later stage, would that be okay to do?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Perfect. If they buy the book, they'll get 10 times more than the presentation. So
absolutely. And thank you once again. I think you provided a great framework on how to take your life to the next level. And we look forward to having you both at Flame whenever this pandemic becomes better. Thanks once again. Thank you, Manish Bhai. Thank you for hosting this. And we thank all the participants that could join us here on Saturday.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tejas. Thank you, Manish bhai. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.